Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. I am Nikki the Great, coming at you again with another message. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about the Tower of Babel, and we're going to be going into a little bit more depth. If you have not already, please subscribe and hit that little notification bell below so you can be made aware of any new videos that I post. Again, thank you so much for joining me in this discussion. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to start with the King James Version, okay? We're going to start with the King James Version, and I'm going to read to you, yes, I'm going to read to you Genesis chapter 11. I'm going to read the entire passage, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the depth that we're going to go into today, okay? Here we go. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to the city and to the tower which the children of men build. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the whole earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the earth. So you're probably asking yourself, well, you reading it didn't really go into depth, so where are you going to find this depth, Nikki? And I'm so glad you asked, okay? I was gifted this amazing book. It's called the Complete Apocrypha, okay? And we are going to be in the Book of Jasher, chapter 9. There is a couple pages here that goes into more depth about the Tower of Babel, because after reading Genesis chapter 11, it leaves us with a couple questions. It leaves us with some things that just are some missing pieces that I believe the Book of Jasher offers. Okay, the first one is whose idea was it to build the tower? Whose idea was it to build a tower? Let me go ahead and answer that. It was King Nimrod, his princes, and great men or great rulers of that time. All right. And another thing that comes to mind is, what was the purpose of the tower? Like, those people spent quite a lot of resources, energy, effort, and time into the tower. What was the purpose of the tower? All right. The purpose of the tower was that nation of people, they wanted to be famous. Straight up, they wanted to be famous. They wanted to be known all over the world for having this huge city and this great, great tower. The second thing was they wanted to rule the whole world. It reminds me of those plots that they have kind of in the cartoon series of, you have a villain and you have a good guy. Well, the villain always wants to control the whole world. And in these days, these guys wanted to control the whole world. Okay. The third purpose of the tower was to avoid evil from enemies. So there was a little bit of insecurity with Nimrod, King Nimrod and his people. They knew they were kind of on the hit list of their enemies. And so with the insecurity, this tower and this great city was going to provide them with this like false sense of security. And so that was another purpose. And they also had the fear of being scattered throughout the earth and not having the strength of being unified. Okay, so the purpose of the Tower of Babel was of four great things that I just mentioned. Okay, so who agreed to building the Tower of Babel? It was King Nimrod. The people went to him with this idea, and you know what? He said, okay, let's go on ahead and do it. All right. And there was over 600,000 men that took part in building the city and the Tower of Babel. 600,000 men. That's over 500,000 men. This was already a pretty big nation of people, and 600,000 men is a lot of men to build it. So what did they do? They went and sought a beautiful piece of land in a valley east of the Shinnor. Okay, so they bought this beautiful piece of property over by the valley, and they just knew this was the place, this was the city they were going to build. They were going to build this tower. They imagined this great, huge fortress, and they went ahead and start doing it. And they began to build. Okay, so what exactly was the problem with them wanting to build? Okay, they wanted to build a city. They wanted to build a tower. What's so bad about that? What is wrong with that? Why did God come down and confuse their tongues so that the building of the city stopped? Let's go ahead and dig into that. Okay, there was three crimes that they were guilty of with the building of this great tower in the city. Okay, number one, it was considered a sin and a transgression. So it was like two bad things that they've done already. I'm gonna tell you why. They were building against God. They were not building with God. Okay. They wanted war with him. They wanted to compete with God in the heavens. So they felt like they were so great and so grand, they could actually be on the same level as God and compete with heaven and get up there and take over heaven. Okay. And that's exactly what another purpose of this was. So that was their crime. They wanted to overthrow God. It reminds me of the story of Lucifer, of him in the uprising of 1/3 of heaven's angels trying to throw him out and take over heaven. So this story, this plot is nothing that's new under the sun. Okay. So let's talk about there were 600,000 men, and they kind of got themselves together in 3 different armies, if you may. Okay, so 3 different groups, armies, people, and what their designated position was. Okay, that they were building a building of the city and the erection of the tower. Okay, the first group, the first army, was to ascend into the heaven and fight God. Like this group of men, they wanted to get into heaven. They wanted to fight God. They wanted to fight the angels. Okay. So the tower was their gateway into heaven to fight God and to fight to fight with the angels. Okay. The second group, the second army, was to ascend into heaven and dethrone God and place their own gods there and worship them. That was a second army. That's what their mindset, that's what their motive was into getting into heaven. Okay. And then the third one, they will ascend into heaven and smite with bows and arrows. They wanted to kill God. They wanted his head on a stick. Okay. And what they didn't know is that God already knew their words, their actions, and their evil thoughts. Like, I don't even know why they would even think that they can even compete with God on that level. I don't know exactly what those guys were under, what influence they were under, but they really believed it. All right. Now, let's talk about some interesting facts about the tower that is not mentioned in the King James Version, okay? Number one, there was a huge city and a very strong tower, okay? So this massive, massive city, and there was a tower. I'm not sure if it was in the middle of it or on the side of it or on the outskirts, but there wasn't just the Tower of Babel. There was a city around the tower. So there was an entire civilization that lived around the tower, okay? So it wasn't just a tower out in the middle of nowhere. It was a population, a group, a nation of people that contributed to this tower. Because it was so high, it would take a cycle of bricks and mortar an entire year to get up the tower. So every single day they were making and building, and every single day they got supplies up and down the tower. But for one cycle of brick and mortar, and actually the Apocrypha says that it was tar. And so the mortar, that was kind of like, it was tar, okay? And so it took an entire year for supplies to get from beneath the tower all the way to the top. So this tower, I know this tower was way past, this tower was way past the clouds. This tower was ginormous. There isn't any metric system that is mentioned in the Apocrypha of the massiveness of this tower, but just the biggest thing you can imagine in your mind, that's how big this tower was, and bigger. Okay. They built every single day. Every single day they built. They didn't take no days off. Okay. They worshiped this tower and the making of this tower so much that If a single brick made its way up to the top of the tower and it accidentally, somebody fumbled the brick and it fell, the men would cry. The builders would cry. They would weep over the brick. Okay. But if a man was on top of the tower working and he lost his life, nobody said anything. Nobody wept. Nobody would even look. So they had more value in the actual equipment, the materials of the making of this tower than they did in each other. So they kind of lost a sense of humanity within themselves, and this tower was like their God that they were worshiping. They looked at it as a gateway into taking over and becoming like gods for themselves. Now, how did this whole thing pan out with? How did God come down? How did he confound? What happened with the war with the three armies that were going to tackle heaven? Let's go ahead and talk about that. Okay. The battle began by this. These men cast arrows toward the heavens. Okay. They shot arrows toward the heaven. And guess what? The arrows came back down with blood on them. And they thought to themselves, we know that we killed some inhabitants of heaven. We killed some angels. We killed God. We shot these arrows up into heaven and they came down with blood. We know. And you know what? This thing I know it kind of stroked their ego. It made them feel like, wow, we are bigger than what we thought we were. We are really, really making it. Okay. They thought we have killed the inhabitants of heaven, but God did this to err them. So the entire time, and mind you, it took years, probably decades for them, maybe even longer. It took probably even people's lifetime to build this huge tower. This thing was not built overnight. And I'm sure God and the inhabitants of heaven were just sitting back, just watching. Because the bigger the tower got, the bigger their egos got. The bigger their confidence got. The bigger that this imaginary scene in their head of being gods was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And God just sat back and just he just watched the whole scene. And God took 70 angels and he said to them, the angels that were in front of him, the Complete Apocrypha, go ahead and read it for yourself. Again, it's taken from the Book of Jasher, chapter 9. Read the entire, it's a few pages, a lot of awesome information. So I'm just paraphrasing to you what the King James Version does not share, okay? But there were 70 angels around God at that time. And God said to the angels, he said, come, let us descend down here and confuse their tongues. So God had enough. I think them arrows, that was it. Y'all that messed up, I'm coming for you. And so he did. Him and his 70 angels come. He said, come, let us descend. So not only did God come, his angels, 70 of his angels came with them. So this is the beginning of the babbling. Okay, this is the beginning of the babbling. What happened to the beginning of the babbling? Each man forgot his own native tongue. Each man forgot his own native tongue. Murder and death resulted from the confusion. So they started killing each other. They started killing each other. When I was reading it, it doesn't say that the angels killed anybody, that God didn't kill anybody. They killed each other. Okay, let's keep going. They killed each other because of confusion over the tools, bricks, supplies, instructions. I think it was with fear that they didn't understand what the other person was doing. Somebody was trying to get more clout for something than the other. There was paranoia. Somebody's asking for brick. Someone gives them mortar. Somebody's asking for a screwdriver. Someone hands them a hammer. I think it's just a bunch of confusion, something they've never experienced before. They just started killing each other, probably out of frustration, probably out of fear, probably because, they still had that insecurity of the neighboring nations coming and doing something and bringing evil upon them. So there's probably a lot of variables that contribute to them actually killing each other. Okay. So what happened to the three armies? The three armies that they had their own purpose of what they were going to do once they bum rushed heaven. I'm going to tell you what happened. They were punished according to their works. Okay. So those who said, we will place our gods in the place of God. So with this army, they were going to snatch God off his throne, do whatever they wanted to do with him, supposedly, and put their own gods in the place and worship them. That army, they became like apes and elephants. They turned into animals. Okay. The second one, the ones that said, we will smite the heavens with arrows. Okay. God killed them through his neighbor. So he didn't kill them personally, but their neighbors, their brothers, their cousins, their co-workers, they killed them. Okay. So what about the army that said, we're going to ascend into the heavens and we're going to fight? God scattered them. So their biggest fear of being scattered, and that was mentioned, I think, twice in this passage, of they had a huge fear of being scattered and not being together and not being unified. That's exactly what happened. And the leftover people that did not kill, they became scattered throughout the land. Okay. So what happened to the tower? Okay. So after this thing of the babbling and people leaving and killing each other, you still have this massive city. You still have this humongous tower that is left and it's pretty much been abandoned. What happened to it? What happened to it? Think about it. What do you think happened to it? I'm going to tell you what happened to it. Okay. The earth opened up and swallowed 1/3 of it. So it was probably a great, earthquake, or what do they call it? A sinkhole came and just swallowed up 1/3 of the city and the tower. So then what happened to the other part of it? Well, fire descended from heaven and burnt another 1/3 of it. So 1/3 was swallowed by the earth. Another 1/3 was burnt up from a fire descending from heaven. And the last remaining 1/3 of it was left. And is still left today. And so after I thought about it, I was like, well, maybe there's some pictures of the city that have been found that I haven't seen. Maybe there's some like a documentary of the Tower of Babel. So I began to research it. And there's not really a structure left from the Tower of Babel, but there are artifacts, okay, that was discovered, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was in like 2017, there were some artifacts that were discovered, and archaeologists, excuse me, some archaeologists were dating the remains back to the Tower of Babel, and that's where those things, so they're still presently, the remains of it is still presently with us. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope it blesses you the way that it blessed me. Hey, study to show yourself approved. I am Nikki the Great, and together we are growing, sharing, and thriving.